Okay, ladies, this is the long-awaited video on how to build the holds all 63 colors of 651 cabinet that my husband made for me that I posted about a week and a half ago. And this is my husband, Frank. Go ahead, Frank.
All right, so here's the cabinet here. You can see it's got two halves to it. Each half can hold 32 shelves to hold the vinyl. So as far as building it, it's actually quite simple. You got to start out by building the frame. Now the frame is made up of 1 inch by 2 inch soft wood. Obviously 1 inch by 2 inch wood is actual dimensions is 3/4 of an inch by 1.5 inches. So the front frame and the back frame are identical in construction. So what you're going to need is you're going to need a bottom piece, a top piece, and then 3 vertical pieces to provide each end, and then the middle. So the bottom pieces basically just cut a length of wood that's 28.5 inches. So for the front and for the back, top and bottom, you're going to need a total of 4 pieces of wood cut to 28.5 inches. Now the vertical pieces, you're going to need 6 total of those pieces. Those pieces are 36 inches in length. So get those pieces cut, and then you're ready to assemble the frame. Now, before you assemble the frame, one thing you need to do is, for each of the 6 vertical pieces, you're going to have to drill holes in those vertical pieces to put your shelf pins that will hold up the shelves. So the holes should be drilled in the very center of the vertical piece, and the spacing should be 1 1/8 inch apart. So that's a lot of hole drilling. Now, what size hole do you drill? The size hole you drill is going to be dependent upon what shelf pins you decide to use. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. But once you drill all the holes in all 6 vertical pieces, you're now ready to assemble it. When I assembled it, since these are nice 90-degree right angles here, one thing I do to try to help me make it nice and square is I actually use a metal 90-degree bracket and a couple of clamps. So the bottom piece will support the vertical pieces, and of course these pieces aren't the actual lengths, but just for demonstration purposes. But I'll put that bracket in there, and then I'll just put in a couple of clamps, tighten those up, and make sure that my wood is nice and square and nice and flush. Tighten those up, and then I'll just drill a small pilot hole from the bottom up, and then put in a 1 1/4 inch wood screw. So you do that for the one end, the opposite end, and then you're also going to have to do that for the middle piece. So now for the vertical middle piece, it's very important that when you put that center piece in there, that you measure it properly. The shelves are all going to be 13 inches by 13 inches. So based on a 28.5 inch bottom piece, you want to measure and make sure that this opening between the end piece and the center piece is about 13 1/8 inch. So if you've measured this all properly, you should have 13 1/8 inch here, and then if you were to measure it from this end, this gap in here would also be 13 1/8 inches. So again, put a little pilot hole in there, put a 1 1/4 inch screw, and then do the other piece. And then repeat that same process to mount the top part of the frame to the vertical pieces. Again, the front frame and the back frame are identical. So you do that for both the front and the back. Now, once you've got your frame put together, you can go ahead and put your shelf pins into the holes that you've drilled. And I should have mentioned earlier that on the vertical pieces, you can drill those holes all the way through all 6 pieces. You don't have to worry about trying to measure the depth as far as how far you put the hole in. Just go all the way straight through on all 31 holes that you're going to drill in your vertical pieces. Now the shelf pins, you're going to need a lot of shelf pins to hold up all the shelves. Now the bottom shelf is actually going to be a shelf sitting right on top of the frame, so you don't have to drill a hole for it. So you will have drilled 31 holes to put the rest of the shelves in there. Now the shelf pins, you're going to need a total of 124 shelf pins for the outside to hold up these shelves. Now you can buy pre-made shelf pins, but for that many shelf pins that can get pretty expensive. So what I decided to do was I got a dowel, and this comes in 4-foot lengths, and this one I believe I picked 3/8 of an inch, and this only cost about $1. And what I did was I just cut this down, so I came up with a total of 124 dowel pins that were 5/8 inch in length. So once you cut those down, take a little bit of sandpaper, get rid of any splinters or whatnot, and then what you do is you just take them and you push them into the holes that you drilled. And hopefully you made the holes the right size, and these things will fit in there quite snugly. If somehow you made the hole too big, you can probably use wood glue, but I didn't have that issue at all on here. I was able to squeeze these in, sometimes actually use a hammer to tap them in, and what I wound up with was I wanted to leave about 1/4 of an inch of the dowel pin sticking out, and that was going to be my shelf pin. Now you do that for the 2 outside vertical pieces. For the center vertical piece, again, you've drilled a hole straight through. What I did was I cut additional shelf pins out of my dowel, and these I cut, let's see, how much did I cut these? 1 1/4 inch. And what that does then is you just use one dowel, you put it right through the hole, and you wind up with, I'm going to show it from the back, it looks better. You wind up with 1/4 inch sticking out on either side to support the left and right shelves that you're going to put in there. So 1 1/4 inch, and let's see, you got 31 shelves times 2. That means you're going to have to cut 62 shelf pins that are 1 1/4 inch. But again, you can slide them through the hole. You might need to use a hammer to tap them in, but you want to be left with roughly about 1/4 of an inch on each side. All right, so at this point you've built the frame, you've put the shelf pins into the vertical pieces. Now how do you put this together? Well, what I did was, for my shelves, I used a material, it's called backing board, but it's not the same backing board that some people may think of that you use like in a shower or something like that.
For tile, yeah.
For tiling or whatnot. It's kind of like a compressed cardboard. It's very solid. It's used for the back of furniture, so like a back of a bookcase or back of a cabinet, something like that. It's a material that's used for that purpose. You can buy these from Lowe's. You can get a 4-foot by 8-foot sheet for roughly about $7 or $8. I highly recommend that you get Lowe's to cut this material for you. I actually started out trying to cut it myself, and it turned out to be a more difficult task than I had envisioned. So I went back and had Lowe's cut them for me, and I think I paid a total of maybe $4 or $5 extra. Yeah, not even. $4 or $5 extra to have Lowe's cut them. So what size do you want to cut them? Well, the shelves themselves, not counting the bottom one, the 31 other shelves that actually will sit on the shelf pins are each 13 inch by 13 inch square. The bottom 2 shelves, which actually will sit on the frame, is 13 inch by 13 1/4 inch. And basically that bottom shelf, all I did was, if you can envision the front and back frame, I wound up just putting the board right on the frame, and on the front I just made sure it was squared up nice so it looked good, and it just sat on the frame, and then I used some real tiny finishing nails and just put some finishing nails in there to secure the bottom shelf, and that's what holds the front and back frame together, is that bottom shelf. Then you want to get another piece cut, and you'll have to figure out what the measurement is, but another piece is backing board cut, and it will sit on the top of the cabinet, so it will actually sit on the top of the frame, both front and in the back. And of course this one should cover the entire surface on the top of the cabinet. Unlike the two at the bottom, which actually serves as your shelves, this one sits right on top. Again, you can use small nails to secure that, or you can even use a staple gun to secure it in place. So basically now you have your frame built with the shelf at the bottom supporting the, holding together the frame at the bottom. And then on the top you have one larger piece of this backing board holding the front and the back of the frame together. At this point, the only other thing really to do is to get some more of this backing board and cut it so that you have a piece in the very back of the cabinet, and cut a piece so that it covers each of the sides. Roughly, those measurements should be roughly about 36 inches in height here, and on the sides it should be about 13 1/4, which would be the same length as what your bottom shelves would be. But again, get Lowe's to cut those for you. Again, you can secure those using small finishing nails or a staple gun and put the cabinet together. At this point, my wife decided she wanted to paint it, so she took it outside and spray painted the outside of the cabinet, spray painted it white. There's no real reason to spray paint anything on the inside, because as you can see, with all the shelves in there pretty close together, and once you put your vinyl in there, you really can't see much on the inside anyway. Alright, so once you've painted it, basically your cabinet is just about done. At this point, you can take your 13-inch by 13-inch shelves and just slide them into the cabinet to give you the additional 62 shelves that you need in there. Once that's all in place, just to put a finishing touch on it, I found some molding. I happened to pick white molding, so I didn't have to do any more painting. But I just got some white molding that I just put around the entire front of the cabinet. About the only other thing I want to say about the molding is I actually just used glue to hold it in place. About the only other thing I'll say about the molding is that the vertical ones on the left and right side, I actually used some molding that was slightly bigger than 3/4 of an inch, maybe about an inch. And the reason I did that was just to prevent the shelf from inadvertently trying to come and slide out. But that actually has not even been a problem. So just get some molding, whatever you like for molding, and just cut it to size and glue it on there, and you're good to go.
And that's it, huh?
That's it. It's pretty easy.
Okay, thanks, baby.